All right. Good day, everyone. This is Father Carter, Father Todd Carter from Holy Innocents Church. Um, I'm making this video because I want to encourage myself to read a book that I actually love very much. It's one of the most influential books I have in my life. It's G.K. Chesterton's Orthodoxy. And I want to read this book again because I find it incredibly fun. Means a lot to me. I get something out of it every single time that I do read it. But also, I think it'd be fun to share with others. And I need some encouragement to force myself to actually do it, since sometimes it's hard things in life which are so challenging to actually do, but they are most rewarding. Not to mention that I think that this book, G.K. Chesterton's Orthodoxy, could be a great help for those who read it, who really ought to read it, but don't for this reason or that reason. I think one big reason why more people don't read this book is because Chesterton, and that's the writer G.K. Chesterton, is hard to it's hard to understand when you're just reading him, especially if you don't have much of a background, and he's much easier to understand when someone is reading him out loud. So I'm going to take some time, hopefully every day, just to read through a chapter a day and get through the whole thing. The book itself is only about 9 chapters long, and this is the very much shortest chapter, the very first one. But it should give some idea of what this book is really about. So, what is G.K. Chesterton's Orthodoxy? You might be wondering right now. It's a book written based on a challenge. When earlier on in Chesterton's career, he wrote a book called Heretics, where he basically made fun of all the various thoughts that were going around in his time that he thought were wrong. And as it explains in the first chapter here of Orthodoxy, he was challenged to write a book that actually explains his own philosophy. And the thing is, normally when someone makes an apologetical work, they set up arguments. They are super clear. Oh, there's no sound? Someone's telling me I have no sound. Could someone else confirm that I have no sound? That's not good. Let's see here. Why wouldn't I have sound? Okay, I'm just gonna, let's see. Okay, so good. Oh, sure. All right, thank you for confirming you can actually hear me. Dave, always helpful. Great. All right, moving on. Where was I? All right, so normally when someone writes an apologetical work, they line up arguments and make things super clear. Chesterton doesn't do that. Chesterton, in fact, is so incredibly witty and roundabout with his logic, you think that he's not making much sense at all. At least that's the impression I had when I first read it so many years ago. But but everything sort of builds up in a very subtle way, and I don't want to ruin it for you guys because reading it eventually things will make more sense than if I try to explain it. So, in case you're wondering, I first read this book when I was in college, right before I converted to Catholicism, and it's one of those books which were a bit of a slow burn to me, because I was challenged by my college roommate, Michael McCaffrey, and hopefully you'll get to see it sooner or later. And he told me that that you can't read Orthodoxy without becoming Catholic. And I wasn't Catholic at the time, it was before my conversion. But he gave me this challenge. I'm like, okay, I'll read it. And it's not what immediately converted me, but it gave me the tools to understand what was going on in Protestant thought at the time. And when I started to examine what people said, I realized that the stuff G.K. Chesterton was talking about really plays out, even though I didn't see it before. It's like he opened up my eyes. In a certain sense, I can say there are two things in the world that I think made me a smarter person in my own formation. One of them is reading this book, Orthodoxy, and also learning Latin. So those two things make me the man I am today. Also, ironic point before I begin further, my roommate's challenge that you can't read Orthodoxy without becoming Catholic is very ironic, because when Chesterton wrote this, A, he wasn't Catholic, and B, he didn't become Catholic for like another 10 years or so. Don't quote me on the exact timeline there. So, but Chesterton is also a very unusual guy, because he would argue for the truths of the Catholic faith like over and over again with people without actually converting himself, and he convinced many other people to convert before he converted himself. Why did he wait? It's because of his wife, because his wife really did not want him to become Catholic, was not Catholic herself, and he didn't want to become Catholic without her. But eventually come into the church, and, happy ending. So, all right, so I have some other things that I would like to say about this, but I know I'm getting to I'm sort of losing it in the weeds here. The point is, I hope that reading this book out loud will encourage people to read it themselves, or at least listen to it, and they'll get something out of it. I might interrupt myself every so often to give my own commentary about this or explain something, but for the most part, I just want to read the text as is and maybe make separate videos or write some posts for my own personal reactions. And of course, if you guys get anything out of this, feel free to leave comments and let me know, or if you have any questions about anything, I'll be sure to answer them, even if it's after the actual videos. Okay, so G.K. Chesterton's Orthodoxy, and I'm reading from the collections here put out by Ignatius Press and Dale Alquist and all those wonderful people. And the first chapter is called Introduction in Defense of Everything Else. The only possible excuse for this book is that it is an answer to a challenge. Even a bad shot is dignified when he accepts a duel. When some time ago I published a series of hasty but sincere papers under the name Heretics, several critics for whose intellect I have a warm respect, I may mention specially Mr. G.S. Street, said that it was all very well for me to tell everyone to affirm his cosmic theory, but I had carefully avoided supporting my precepts with example. I will begin to worry about my philosophy, said Mr. Street, when Mr. Chesterton has given us his. It was perhaps an incautious suggestion to make to a person only too ready to write books upon the feeblest provocations. But after all, though Mr. Street has inspired and created this book, he need not read it. If he does read it, he will find that in its pages I have attempted in a vague and personal way, in a set of mental pictures, rather than in a series of deductions, to state the philosophy in which I have come to believe. I will not call it my philosophy, for I did not make it. God and humanity made it, and it made me. I have often had a fancy for writing a romance about an English yachtsman who slightly miscalculated his course and discovered England under the impression that it was a new island in the South Seas. I always find it, however, that I am either too busy or too lazy to write this fine work, so I may as well give it away for the purposes of philosophical illustration. There will probably be a general impression that the man who landed, armed to the teeth and talking by signs to plant the British flag on that barbaric temple, which turned out to be the pavilion at Brighton, felt rather a fool. I am not here concerned to deny that he looked a fool, but if you imagine that he felt a fool, or at any rate that the sense of folly was his soul or his dominant emotion, then you have not studied with sufficient delicacy the rich romantic nature of the hero of this tale. His mistake was really a most enviable mistake, and he knew it, if he was the man I take him for. What could be more delightful than to have in the same few minutes all the fascinating terrors of going abroad combined with all the humane security of coming home again? What could be better than to have all the fun of discovering South Africa without the disgusting necessity of landing there? What could be more glorious than to brace oneself up to discover New South Wales and then realize with a gush of happy tears that it was really old South Wales? This, at least, seems to me the main problem for philosophers, and is in a manner the main problem of this book. How can we contrive to be at once astonished at the world and yet at home in it? How can this queer cosmic town, with its many-legged citizens, with its monstrous and ancient lamps, how can this world give us at once the fascination of a strange town and the comfort and honor of being our own town? To show that a faith or a philosophy is true from every standpoint would be too big an undertaking for even for a much bigger book than this. It is necessary to follow one path of argument, and this is the path that I here propose to follow. I wish to set forth my faith as particularly answering this double spiritual need. The need for that mixture of the familiar and the unfamiliar, which Christendom has rightly named romance. For the very word romance has in it the mystery and ancient meaning of Rome. Any one setting out to dispute anything ought always to begin by saying that he does not dispute. Beyond stating what he proposes to prove, he should always state what he does not propose to prove. The thing I do not propose to prove, the thing I propose to take as common ground between myself and any average reader, is this desirability of an active and imaginative life, picturesque and full of poetical curiosity, a life such as Western man, at any rate, always seems to have desired. If a man says that extinction is better than existence, or blank existence better than variety and adventure, then he is not one of the ordinary people to whom I am talking. If a man prefers nothing, I can give him nothing. But nearly all people I have ever met in this Western society in which I live would agree to the general proposition that we need this life of practical romance. The combination of something that is strange with something that is secure. We need so to view the world as to combine an idea of wonder and an idea of welcome. We need to be happy in this wonderland without once being merely comfortable. It is this achievement of my creed that I shall chiefly pursue in these pages. But I have a peculiar reason for mentioning the man in a yacht who discovered England. For I am that man in a yacht. I discovered England. I do not see how this book can avoid being egotistical, and I do not quite see, to tell the truth, how it can avoid being dull. Dullness will, however, free me from the charge which I most lament, the charge of being flippant. Mere light sophistry is the thing that I happen to despise most of all things. And it is perhaps a wholesome fact that this is the thing which I am generally accused. I know nothing so contemptible as a mere paradox, a mere ingenious defense of the indefensible. If it were true, as has been said, that Mr. Bernard Shaw lived upon paradox, then he ought to be a mere common millionaire, for a man of his mental activity could invent a sophistry every 6 minutes. It is as easy as lying, because it is lying. The truth is, of course, that Mr. Shaw is cruelly hampered by the fact that he cannot tell any lie unless he thinks it is the truth. I find myself under the same intolerable bondage. I never in my life said anything merely because I thought it funny, though, of course, I have had ordinary human vainglory and may have thought it funny because I said it. It is one thing to describe an interview with a gorgon or a griffin, a creature who does not exist. It is another thing to discover that a rhinoceros does exist and then take pleasure in the fact that he looks as if he didn't. One searches for truth, but it may be that one pursues instinctively the more extraordinary truths. And I offer this book with the heartiest sentiments to all the jolly people who hate what I write and regard it, very justly, for all I know, as a piece of poor clowning or a single tiresome joke. For if this book is a joke, it is a joke against me. I am the man who, with the utmost daring, discovered what had been discovered before. If there is an element of farce in what follows, the farce is my own expense. For this book explains how I fancied I was the first to set foot in Brighton, and then found I was the last. It recounts my elephantine adventures in pursuit of the obvious. No one can think my case more ludicrous than I think it myself. No reader can accuse me here of trying to make a fool of him. I am the fool of this story, and no rebel shall hurl me from my throne. I freely confess all the idiotic ambitions of the end of the 19th century. I did, like all other solemn little boys, try to be in advance of the age. Like them, I tried to be some 10 minutes in advance of the truth, and I found that I was 1800 years behind it. I did strain my voice with a painful juvenile exaggeration in uttering my truths, and I was punished in the fittest and funniest way, for I have kept my truths, but I have discovered not that they were not truths, but simply that they were not mine. When I fancied that I stood alone, I was really in the ridiculous position of being backed up by all Christendom. It may be, heaven forgive me, that I did try to be original, but I only succeeded in inventing all by myself an inferior copy of an existing tradition of the existing traditions of civilized religion. The man from the yacht thought he was filled. Excuse me, I'm going to try that again. The man from the yacht thought he was the first to find England. I thought I was the first to find Europe. I did try to found a heresy of my own, and when I had put the last touches to it, I discovered that it was Orthodoxy. It may be that somebody will be entertained by the account of this happy fiasco. It might amuse a friend or an enemy to read how I gradually learnt from the truth of some stray legend or from the falsehood of some dominant philosophy. Things that I might have learnt from my catechism. If I had learned it, there may or may not be some entertainment in reading now how I found at last in an anarchist club or a Babylonian temple what I might have found in the nearest parish church. If anyone is entertained by learning how the flowers of the field or the phrases in an omnibus, the accidents of politics, or the pains of youth came together in a certain order to produce a certain conviction of Christian orthodoxy, he may possibly read this book. But there is in everything a reasonable division of labor. I have written the book, and nothing on earth would induce me to read it. I add one purely pedantic note, which comes as a note naturally should at the beginning of the book. These essays are concerned only to discuss the actual fact that the central Christian theology, sufficiently summarized in the Apostles' Creed, is the best root of energy and sound ethics. They are not intended to discuss the very fascinating but quite different question of what is the present seat of authority for the proclamation of that creed. When the word orthodoxy is used here, it means the Apostles' Creed, as understood by everybody calling himself Christian. Until a very short time ago, and the general historic conduct of those who held such a creed. I have been forced by mere space to confine myself to what I have got from this creed. I do not touch the matter with much disputed among modern Christians of where we ourselves got it. But this is not an ecclesiastical treatise, but a sort of slovenly autobiography. But if anyone wants my opinion about the actual nature of the authority, Mr. G.S. Street has only to throw me another challenge, and I will write him another book. All right, so that was the first chapter. In case you're wondering, I don't know quite how long I spent on this, but that was only 5 pages, and the very next chapter, called The Maniac, is 16 pages. So it should take about 3 times as long, if not more, for me to read that one. Okay. But thank you very much for this reading. Oh, and I'm glad you love this book, Paul. Great. I will respond in the comments there if anyone had any questions that I might have missed. And we'll see if I can make this a more regular thing, or at least something I do daily if you liked it. All right. So hope you have a good day. Everyone stay safe. God love you.